You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, you're back from the draft. Everything is, we're back in our regular studio, and it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, it has been quite a ride. It's nice to be back in my chair, in my office, with my background, not in a parking garage, which luckily I had cell service for when recording. But kudos to the guys, though, who are helping power this show. That's Wisconsin's own Ticket King. That's our sponsor for over 30 years. Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans, as well as Bucks, Brewers, and Summerfest tickets. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. Once again, theticketking.com. The link is right there on your screen if you're watching with us on YouTube or Facebook today. Remember to support local Wisconsin businesses. And while you're here, while you're on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at, watch every episode of No Huddle Radio on Packers Talk Network on YouTube. Click on the bell. Turn the notifications on. You can join the discussion, chat with us live. Love to see and talk about the comments coming our way. And Gil, it was a fun weekend in Green Bay. I think Green Bay overall did a tremendous job with the draft. Mark Murphy, that's quite the magnum opus to send to go off into retirement, go off into the sunset for. But I want to talk a little bit about the team and what the Packers did to improve this team. Now, obviously, we talked about day one. We talked about day two. The day one pick, obviously, people were floored with that. A receiver for the first time in 23 years. Day two, another receiver and an absolute mauler. It looks like a tackle who goes by Escalade. And day three, well, it looks like some promising guys coming in. What stands out from the Packers day three draft selections for you? We'll get through the nitty gritty and the details, but I want to hear what your thoughts were from day three, Gil.
You know, it was interesting because day one, they go all offense, which I don't think too many people expected. Day one and two, all offense. Day three, almost all defense. So, you know, I guess the biggest surprise to me is that they did not address cornerback sooner.
Yeah.
Maybe that says something about other things that are going on right now, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the show. But I think the fact that it was so one-sided for offense in the first 2 days and one-sided on the defensive side of the ball on day three, plus the lack of a cornerback, that's what stood out initially for me.
And day one, I think the big thing with that was they know Jeff Hafley's a really good D coordinator. Yes, he could use some more pieces on defense. Of course he could. But they feel like the way the Packers drafted the first 2 days, it was a matter of, hey, we got bullied on the O-line as soon as Elton Jenkins went down, and we did not have anything at receiver after the Watson injury the week before, the Dobbs injury during that game, another concussion. And they're just like, hey, our offense has got to be better to be able to really, really go. But day three, I think the thing is that stood out where they picked a couple defensive ends who are strictly going to be in there for pass rushing. And I know Brian Gutekunst has said where there was talk about the Packers maybe going after Azeez Ojulari at the deadline last year, or maybe in free agency, purely a pass rush specialist with the Giants. Of course, now he lands with the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. But Brian Gutekunst said his worry about guys like that is that if they're pressed into duty where they have to, if Rashawn Gary goes down or a Lucas Van Ness goes down, that they can't handle being in there 3 downs, and they can't handle the grind of a full game. They can only handle so many snaps a game and being pass rush specialists. But I like that their first 2 picks on day three, Barron Sorrell from Texas and Colin Oliver from Oklahoma State, guys who aren't the biggest defensive ends, especially Colin Oliver, 6'2", 240. But these guys can get after the passer, and I really, really like those selections for day three. I think it's good value.
Yeah, I agree. And boy, was it a great story seeing Barron Sorrell at
the draft
on day three.
I was there for it. That was so cool. When Roger Goodell said on stage, we have a special guest here for this pick. I thought it was maybe going to be like a Make-A-Wish kid or something like that.
Right,
That's what
a presenter.
And then he comes walking out. It's like, that is so cool. And the Packers sound like they didn't even know about that either.
No, they did not know in advance that he was there, and it was great, and he handled it so well, and he fit right in Green Bay. So it was a nice. You don't expect that on day 3,
No.
okay? And to have that happen that way was sort of poetic and very, very, very moving. The other thing that struck me though about day 3, and I think maybe about the whole draft, speed, athleticism, and versatility. Those, and you could say that about every Brian Gutekunst draft. Like those are his goals or among his goals, but he really did emphasize speed, athleticism, and versatility in this draft.
And of course, it wouldn't be a Brian Gutekunst draft though without drafting a guy from Georgia. They didn't draft a guy from Georgia the first couple days, but they did draft defensive tackle Warren Brinson in round 6, 6'5", 315, had 6 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, and a pass deflection in 5 years with the Bulldogs. Of course, it wouldn't be a draft without a Georgia Bulldog coming to the team. And after losing TJ Slayton in free agency, you get some competition possibly in that D tackle room. Maybe a guy who can play in the nose, maybe along the defensive line. So it's worth taking a flyer on a Georgia guy, obviously, in Brian Gutekunst's opinion. So can't argue with the 6th round pick, too.
No, and then they doubled down in unrestricted free agency on another Georgia defensive tackle. So it's like, hey, Bulldogs, they're going to carry the G, right? They're going to keep carrying the G when they get into the pros.
Yeah, and Nazir Stackhouse, that's who Gil's referring to for those who aren't up to date with the undrafted free agent signings for the Packers. And that's a guy who I feel like Nazir Stackhouse was a pretty good value signing in undrafted free agency, where it sounded like this guy could have gone as high as round 5. So you get a big guy like that, 6'4", 320. He's a run stuffer. That's his MO as a defensive tackle, but that's not bad because you lost a good run defender in TJ Slayton in free agency. And then linebacker Jamin Dumas Johnson from Kentucky. Only played 1 year at Kentucky, but his 3 previous years were at Georgia as well. 6'1", 245, 13 sacks, 25 tackles for loss, and 2 interceptions in 4 years of college football. And then also to round up the draft, the Packers also drafted in round 7, cornerback Micah Robinson from Tulane, 5'11", 185, had a couple interceptions, 6 pass deflections last year for the Green Wave, as Gil mentioned. They waited super late to draft a corner, which is very surprising. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. And then I like the 7th round pick also with offensive lineman John Williams, 6'4", 322, started 24 straight games at left tackle. He appeared in 52 total games with the Bearcats in college. That 2021 team that went to the college football playoff, he played in 12 games, started 3 of those games that year. One of the better pass blocking linemen in the Big 12 last season. And how about this, Gil? Aerospacing engineering major at Cincinnati. So you know he's got some brains too.
Yeah, I was about to say that wasn't my major. So it's
no, not me either. That's way over my head. And that's it's like that's an aerospace joke, way over my head. So
but I'm bumcha. There you go.
Yeah, so that's a guy too where he could be an interesting piece, an interesting competition for Travis Glover and Kadeem Telford in coming up in camp this upcoming summer and everything. So that O-line battle I think is going to be really good. Just good value picks it look like on paper, but we don't really know until we actually see it in person.
Yeah, I mean, look, you always read about these guys and what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what the concerns are transitioning from college football to pro football. But until you see them on the field, like it's amazing how often coaches and teammates know after a week's worth of practices, this guy can play, this guy we're not so sure about, and oh boy, how did this guy get drafted by us?
I think I remember hearing when Josh Sitton was honored, what was it, this past year or the week or the year before, where he talked to the Green Bay media and essentially the Brian Gutekunst, and I think Brian Gutekunst chimed in. We were saying it's like we knew we had something with Josh Sitton in the first week that we saw him.
Yeah.
Which is just outstanding. And Josh Sitton was a very, very good player for the Green Bay Packers and a very good NFL player in general. And the Packers had tremendous value finding him as a day 3 selection as well. With the undrafted free agent class, Gil, that's coming in, there's a number of guys who we're gonna see in camp and everything, and we're gonna get probably more into the undrafted free agency talk as the offseason rolls along. But who's outside of Nazir Stackhouse, Jamin Dumas Johnson? Those are 2 guys who really stand out. Anyone else who stands out on that list to you?
Those were the 2 biggest ones, really. I mean, I have a feeling Nazir is going to make this team. I just have that feeling. He fits a specific role. A lot of people actually thought that, he could go higher than Brinson did. So, and the Packers drafted Brinson. So I am kind of focused most on him out of all of them. How about you?
So those two guys, obviously big headliners, but outside of that, wide receiver Julian Fleming. He spent his final year at Penn State. Before that, though, he was at Ohio State, and he was a high-level recruit too, Gil. If you remember, he was in the same recruiting class as Jackson Smith and Jigba. Jackson Smith and Jigba is the number one guy now in Seattle, and I believe he, according to multiple recruiting sites, I think he was actually a higher-rated recruit than Jackson Smith and Jigba when he enrolled at Ohio State, but he just had trouble cracking the rotation when he was at Ohio State. He battled some injuries too while he was there. 6'2", 210 pounds. He showed flashes. Career high 34 catches, 533 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 2022 with the Buckeyes. Part of Penn State's college football playoff team a season ago. A guy who has a lot of talent, but just injury luck has been rough for him, and he just hasn't really found a way to crack the rotation at Penn State and Ohio State. But maybe something clicks in the NFL, and I think it's going to present good competition in camp, because if he could play at the level, if he could show that he still has 5-star recruit tendencies and traits in the NFL, he's going to get a legit run and a legit opportunity to make this team.
Yeah, but so deep at receiver right now. Yeah. There may not be
a
number
one
guy, but 13 receivers in camp. I mean, it's for 5 or 6 spots. And you got to lock in at least 5 of those guys. So
it's an uphill battle for sure. But I think he's going to make it a little more interesting than people think. If he's healthy, if something clicks for him, better later than never at all, But I'm excited. Yeah, but I'm excited about this class though. I think overall it was a fun draft weekend being up there in person. I think the Packers overall did a good job. They filled a lot of areas of need and did a lot of work to really improve this roster. And I think they did a good job overall. But that leads to the big question now that looms from the draft, where we didn't see cornerback Jaire Alexander get moved. And Jaire has been the center of trade talks. The Packers, they thought they were probably going to move him this past weekend. They only drafted the Michael Robinson, the one corner, in the 7th round, second to last pick of the draft as well. Tom Silverstein, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, reported after the draft the Packers still intend to trade Jaire Alexander, but then ESPN's Rob Demovsky reported earlier this week Jaire and the Packers are discussing a possible resolution. Matt LaFleur said Jaire is participating in voluntary offseason programming this spring. He's been seen working out with Xavier McKinney. For what it's worth, he followed Matthew Golden, the Packers' new first-round selection, on Instagram. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer reported on Thursday that the most likely scenario for the Packers and Jaire is a reconciliation on a reduced contract with incentives. But if Jaire were to move on from the Packers, he would prefer to be released so he could choose his next destination. Gil, where are we at with this, man? I mean, it's like, I feel like this is like Steve Buscemi in Armageddon, where he's like, are we staying? We going? We staying? We going? When he gets the spaceman, so it's like, hey, man, I had a front row seat to the end of Jaire's time in Green Bay. And I feel like that's where it's like, is he staying or is he going? What's going on, and what can you make of this?
I think it's all going to come down to money more than anything else. And the key in my mind is Jaire and his agent have to figure out, if he hits the open market, what would he get if the Packers were to release him? And if that number is lower than some offers, the Packers say, hey, we'll restructure the contract, we'll throw in the incentives, but the base salary will be X. If X is higher than what the market seems to be bearing, he'll stay. If X is significantly lower, then he has no way that he'll want to stay. Now, we have never heard throughout this entire time, Jaire wants to be traded. Jaire is unhappy in Green Bay. We just know that the relationship between the team and the player has got some issues here. So I think it's going to come down to money, and Jaire is going to do what's best for him and his family. And the Packers have to figure out what they can how they can maximize the situation. They don't want to lose him for nothing, and they certainly don't want to have him be let go for nothing and then sign with the Vikings or the Lions or the Bears or the Eagles, some team that the Packers are going to be competing with in the NFC. You don't want that.
I would think if Jaire were to just be outright released by the Packers, if they can't come to some kind of resolution, I would think he would go to Baltimore just to reunite with his old college teammate, Lamar Jackson. Baltimore's a damn good football team. I mean, that's probably a top 5 football team in the NFL right now. Yeah. But you never know, because you've seen this multiple times where a disgruntled player leaves the Packers and he goes to a division rival right away. So it's like that's definitely not out of the question either, Gil. So I totally understand that. But with Jaire, it's just the Packers are not in cap hell right now. They're not. They're in a good situation, but unless the bridge is just so burned and it's just broken beyond repair, and you got to cut them, then you got to cut them. But they're not in financial distress right now. And if they hold on to him this year, I don't even care if he plays one game. I don't care if he plays one snap. You can let go of him after the season, and the cap repercussions are very minimal. There's not a lot of money. It's not a huge albatross when it comes to the actual cap when you look at it as a whole. Now, the Packers have a lot of key guys coming up for big contracts going into next year, but Jaire's not going to take up a huge amount of space. I don't understand it. I definitely wouldn't extend his contract, but just let it ride at this point, honestly. It's like you don't get it. If you're not going to get anything in a trade, just let it ride, and hopefully you can find a resolution and a reconciliation at a minimum.
The one thing you don't want to have is an unhappy Jaire Alexander creating problems in the locker room. That is something I think, because say what you want about Jaire Alexander, he's not a quiet and unassuming dude, okay? Yeah. He lets his feelings be known. He's vocal, and a brooding or angry Jaire Alexander could create problems in that locker room. Thankfully, though, and you alluded to this, his contract is not an albatross around the neck of the Packers like the last contract that Aaron Rodgers had signed, where it was just taking up way too much cap space, and he wasn't producing anymore on the field, and he was making all kinds of demands. All of a sudden, he was a player who, even as good as he was, became more trouble than what he was worth. Whereas you can afford this year to hold on to Jaire, even if he plays another 7 games. But boy, you really want to make sure if you get him out on the field, the cornerback room goes from good or pretty good with a lot of questions to, hey, we've got a shutdown guy on this roster, and that takes the whole defense to another level. And it gives Jeff Hafley opportunities to do different things on defense that maybe he can't do without that shutdown corner.
I think Jaire, on the personal side, I think he's like fine with the coaches. I really do. I think this is just strictly, this is business. This is all business. That's where this is all rooting. This is all what it's rooting for. Now I've seen Chuck Norris, like the Chuck Norris, not the Chuck Norris, but a Chuck Norris impersonator is chiming in on the chat on YouTube. Appreciate you following, Chuck. Saying he's talking about contracts. It's like Jaire and Clark are both bad. Kenny Clark are both bad contracts. Jaire is not really. I mean, it's like because there's a lot of unguaranteed money now. The rest of the way, it's not going to be huge. It's not going to have a huge impact on the cap. The cap is only growing. Saying Jordan Love is way overpaid. That's a discussion for another day. That's the price you pay for a franchise quarterback. I'm sorry. And you know what? I'm going to give Jordan Love a little grace. I think the guy played hurt pretty much all last year after the Brazil game. So, and you see where he was the highest paid guy in the NFL for 6 days until Dak Prescott got a new contract. Just the going rate for NFL quarterbacks. So that's
and I would take Love over Prescott any day.
No, God, no, absolutely not. I don't think Dallas wants Dak. I think Dallas wants to get out of the Dak Prescott business too. So just my opinion. Now, with Jaire not being traded over the weekend, Gil, outside of that, maybe what was the biggest surprise from the Packers 2025 draft as a whole?
I think just taking a receiver finally in round 1. Every year you hear, oh, yeah, maybe they can do this and they need a receiver and there's this guy out there. I mean, 2020, I really thought would have been the year they were going to do it. And allegedly they tried to, but all the guys they wanted were off the board. But to have Matthew Golden still available at 23 and for the Packers to be able to grab him and then to double down and pick another receiver in round 3, clearly there's some changes coming to that room.
Oh, for sure. And I think for me, and Chuck Norris did chime in. He's been very active on the chat. I appreciate that, Chuck. He said Bolton was a major reach. Don't get sucked by the draft industrial complex. I'm telling you, where I think Anthony Belton. I'm sorry. I think Belton was a lot higher on boards than maybe the consensus was. The guy had a really tremendous Senior Bowl. Watch his tape. I don't know if you've watched any of his tape. That dude mauls people. Like he could be something, man. Like this could be a really, really good pickup for the Packers. And if you saw too, an offensive lineman wasn't picked for a while after Anthony Belton got picked by the Packers. I think those premium guys were going fast, so the Packers made sure they had to get him. And maybe he should have fallen in round 3, but maybe the Packers, if they wanted him in round 3, he wouldn't have been available by pick 87 when they were picking in round 3. It just wasn't happening. But I would say the biggest surprise though from the Packers 2025 draft was Brian Gutekunst not making a trade for the first time in his tenure as GM. And first time the Packers, whoever's in charge, haven't made a trade in the draft during draft weekend since 2014. That was a massive surprise. Maybe Gutekunst was distracted by all the crowd outside of his office and everything for 3 straight days, but that was a bit shocking, especially after you heard that the Packers had some pretty enticing offers to move out of 23, but it sounded like he wanted Matthew Golden more than anybody else in the first round this year, which is, hey, if your heart is set on a player, you have at it, and you make sure that guy doesn't get away from you.
No, I agree. And look, they're remaking the offensive line. They want to be bigger and more physical. And I think, when you lose to the Eagles in the playoffs and the Eagles go on to win the Super Bowl, you kind of look at, okay, what made them special? And it was dominating in the trenches more than anything. So I think the Packers are sort of, it's a copycat league, and you copy the team that won the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. That's the way you got to approach it. Now, moving forward, Thursday was a kind of a big day when it came to fifth-year options. 2021 or 2022 draft selections. Teams had to decide whether or not to pick up their fifth-year options for 2026. That's first-round picks only, and Packers had 2 decisions to make with defensive tackle Devonte Wyatt and linebacker Quay Walker. Well, they picked up the fifth-year option for defensive tackle Devonte Wyatt. It's going to be about a $12.9 million price tag. They declined Quay Walker's fifth-year option. Brian Gutekunst has been adamant that he wants to extend Quay Walker. He wants to keep him around for the long-term future. Gil, what do you make of this? Right decision, wrong decision? What do you make of this?
I'm on board with this. I mean, I think that you're overpaying Wyatt a little bit, but not a lot. And you still could work out a multi-year deal where, you extend him and then it's not just the fifth-year option. But Wyatt brings a little juice to the interior pass rush, and you can't just let that walk away. So the drawback with him is he's never started. He has 5 starts in his first 3 seasons total, all of them coming in 2023. You want to see Wyatt take on a bigger role this year, but you can't just let him walk away. And I just think Walker would have been overpaid on that fifth-year option for what he's given you. And hopefully they could work out some kind of a deal to keep him in Green Bay. I think he's a decent player, but he's got to show that last 4 or 5 games that he played last year were not just a hot streak. It's the new level of play that he's capable of doing.
Yeah, Devonte Wyatt, the $12.9 million price tag, if he keeps improving the way he's improved the last couple of years in the NFL, $12.9 million is going to be a bargain. I mean, that's so the Packers are just protecting themselves where D tackle's getting paid a lot. And remember, he was the 28th overall pick. Quay Walker was the 22nd overall pick, which means his price tag for the fifth-year option would have been much higher, would have been fully guaranteed. So I think it's a smart move by the Packers to not pick up that option. They regretted that with Darnell Savage when they did that a few years ago. And now Savage isn't obviously with them anymore. They totally remade the safety room after the 2023 season. With Quay Walker, though, I do think he's a part of the future for the Packers, but they could definitely get him at a much cheaper price tag compared to what they would be paying him in year 5. So overall, I think it was solid decision-making by the Packers front office with these fifth-year options.
Yeah, I think they more or less handled it very well. And, if they do lock up both of these players beyond next year, I think it's excellent.
And Chuck Norris, yeah, he's all over this chat, man. He said good drafting O-line is basically blaming the line for Love's injuries. Nah, man, good drafting O-line is him looking ahead to the future. There's 3 pending free agents coming up on the starting offensive line who are up for free agency after this season. You got to make sure you refill that cupboard before those guys go, because guess what? Those guys get paid, especially when they're good. Probably going to lose a couple of those starters. I'm just saying. I'm just going to chime in right there. But speaking of more offseason news, the Packers, after the draft, they signed Isaiah Simmons. And for those who are like, oh, wait, I know that name. Why do I know that name? Well, he was the former 8th overall pick by the Cardinals in the 2020 draft out of Clemson. And the Packers signed him to a 1-year deal this week, just after the draft. An athletic marvel, Gil, with potentially great versatility, 6'4", 238. He turns 27 in July, so he's still young. But overall, he's just been a disappointment in the NFL. He spent his first 3 years with the Cardinals before he was traded to the Giants before the start of the 2023 season for a late-round pick. Spent the last 2 years with New York, 8.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, a couple pick sixes in his 5-year career. And the Packers, Gil, the way I see this, they've taken chances on athletic dudes who are former first-round picks to see if there's still potential and room to grow, with Andre Dillard last year, Sammy Watkins in 2022. This is a low-risk, potentially high-reward, so why not sign a guy like this who, and maybe you can unlock something?
Yeah, no, I think they definitely could unlock something. I am not expecting him to be a game changer. I think he'll be a special teams guy and maybe in some pass rush packages where he'll be blitzing, and he can give you some versatility. He could play linebacker. He could play safety. Anything you get from him is a bonus, and if he doesn't pan out, what did you lose? A signing bonus? I mean,
it's nothing. This costs practically nothing, and the Packers love versatility everywhere on this team.
Speed and versatility.
This guy just makes sense. You put him in the box as a linebacker or a safety. You can have him drop back and pass coverage. There's a lot you could potentially do with him. I don't know. Jeff Hafley's a good coach, Gil. Maybe he can find something that maybe other coaches weren't able to find with him early in his career. Who knows? Overall, like the signing, I think it's a good addition. It's a good camp body at least, and a good special teamer, like you said.
Yeah, I think Rich Bisaccia will be very happy with him, and I think Jeff Hafley will find a way to use him that, he may only play 20 snaps a game on defense, but if 1 or 2 of them are high impact, it's a great signing.
Well, Gil, now that the draft is wrapped up and the Packers made a few decisions on their 2022 first-round draft picks, we're kind of now in another lull of the offseason, but it's still a pretty busy time. The NFL's a 365-day-a-year calendar for the most part. What articles do you have coming up on Packers Post and Cheesehead TV?
Well, for Cheesehead, I did take a deep dive into the whole Jaire Alexander situation and basically the Packers cornerback room overall. Without Jaire, how do they stand? With Jaire, how do they stand? So I kind of tried to break that down. And for Packers Post, so many different articles that I have kind of been working on. But, in addition to the Jaire situation, I talked about Isaiah Simmons' fit and also some of the changes to the wide receiver room that we're going to see.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of competition, very eventful camp coming up and offseason coming up. And yeah, that Jaire deep dive, that's got to be a very, very deep dive. I want him back. Just Packers, make it work, man. Just please, they're not in financial hell. Like, just make it work, please, for at least one more year. And if it doesn't get better, then move on. That's fine. Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. Well, as we just mentioned, the Packers signed former first-round pick Isaiah Simmons to a 1-year contract earlier this week. Simmons was the 8th overall pick out of Clemson in the 2020 NFL draft. He entered the NFL draft as a linebacker safety hybrid type of defender, which he still is considered today. Now, in the 2020 NFL draft, the first true safety did not get selected until day 2 in the 2nd round. And Gil, which current NFL player was the first true safety selected in the 2020 NFL draft?
2020.
And just know there's a reason why we're on a Packers podcast, why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, so that's the giveaway. It's got to be the X-Man, Xavier McKinney.
Why did I even say that? It's safety or Xavier McKinney. He was the second round pick, 36th overall selection by the New York Giants. Again, wasn't selected till day 2 of that draft. when they selected the decorated Alabama safety. He was the 7th defensive back overall selected in the draft. 6 corners went in round 1 before McKinney. Gil, you want to take a stab at who those 6 corners were picked before him?
No, I do not.
Okay, sounds good. Well, McKinney spent his first 4 years in the NFL with the Giants before the Packers signed him last offseason to that mega contract. And so far, obviously, he's been well worth the price tag. He's probably been their best deep cover safety since Nick Collins registered 8 interceptions in his first season with the Packers, was named to the first team All-Pro team. And if you need a reminder, Gil, the Packers selected current quarterback Jordan Love 10 picks before McKinney in 2020 So, yeah, that was, I don't know why I even bothered to say that. It's just like, because I wanted you to think where it's like, I was like, oh, let's see.
Well, I knew there had to be a Packers tie-in somewhere. You're not going to ask me if the answer is just some guy who plays randomly for the Arizona Cardinals, I mean,
hey, Kyle Duggar went 1 pick right after Xavier McKinney. So yes. I could have just thrown a curveball, but like, no, Xavier McKinney was 2nd, but no, he wasn't though. So it's like, yeah, that's just, that was kind of what I was going at. So it's, yeah. So maybe Isaiah Simmons, he can maybe get to Xavier McKinney's level now, talking along those lines. But first round's just a label. It's just a matter. You got to show it when you're actually on the field in the NFL.
That's it. The first round is maybe your potential, and then you got to go out and prove that you can live up to that potential. Let's
hope. Fingers crossed. Let's hope the Packers had a kick butt draft class this past week, and yeah, let's on to bigger and better things. Green and golden all the way, baby.
Absolutely. Looking forward to rookie camp, OTAs, voluntary minicamp, mandatory minicamp.
And whatever happens with Jaire Alexander.
That's it. So never a dull moment in Green Bay, and that's a good thing. And we'll have it covered throughout the offseason. We're going to be here all year long. All right, that is it for this week. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter @GilPackers and @GBPackersSean. Stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show, and thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go!
Go Pack Go!